A black SUV pulls into the valet line outside a restaurant. The driver steps out wearing a watch worth more than most people's monthly rent. Inside, he orders expensive wine, picks up the bill, laughs too loudly, and drives home to a house financed at 7% on a car lease he can barely afford, with credit card balances growing in the background like mold behind drywall. Across town, another man pulls into a grocery store parking lot in a 10-year-old Toyota. His clothes are plain. His watch is invisible. Nobody notices him, but one of these men can quit his job tomorrow, the other cannot. You see them everywhere. Luxury cars, designer bags, perfect vacations, curated kitchens, rooftop cocktails, business class selfies. The modern economy has turned visible wealth into a public performance, and the brutal mathematical reality is that much of what looks rich is simply future income being spent early. That is the contradiction almost nobody wants to admit. The person who looks rich is often borrowing status from the future. The person who looks average may already own it. For decades, people were taught that wealth looked a certain way. Bigger house, newer car, better neighborhood, more upgrades, more proof. But the rules changed quietly. Housing costs rose faster than wages. Cars became subscription payments. Vacations moved onto credit cards. Social media turned comparison into a full-time job. Now a family can earn $250,000 a year and still feel trapped. You see it in small moments. A couple arguing in a parking lot after daycare pickup because one unexpected expense hit the checking account too early. A man checking his banking app before agreeing to dinner with friends. A woman with a luxury handbag sitting in her car, delaying the drive home because she cannot face another argument about money. The raise did not make them freer. It made the lifestyle more expensive. And that is where stealth wealth begins. Not as a fashion choice, not as false modesty, but as a defensive strategy in a culture where looking successful often destroys the very thing success was supposed to buy: freedom. The first hidden cost of looking rich is not the purchase itself. It is the permanent monthly obligation that comes after it. A luxury SUV is not just an $85,000 vehicle. It is a lease payment, a higher insurance bill, more expensive tires, premium fuel, dealership maintenance, registration taxes, parking anxiety, and the quiet fear of every new scratch. The visible object is only the entry fee. The real cost arrives every month after that. That is why two people with the same income can live in completely different financial realities. One person buys a used car, keeps housing costs controlled, and lets the gap compound quietly in retirement accounts, index funds, cash reserves, and home equity. The other fills every increase in income with a new visible reward. The raise feels real for about 3 weeks. Then the new baseline forms around it. A bigger apartment becomes normal. Nicer dinners become normal. A second streaming service, a better gym, private school, monthly car detailing, upgraded flights, premium groceries, wine subscriptions, after-school programs. None of them feel catastrophic individually. Together, they become a machine that consumes every future raise before it arrives. And then something breaks. A layoff. A health issue. A recession. A new baby. An aging parent. A mortgage reset. Suddenly, the person who looked successful realizes they do not own their lifestyle. Their lifestyle owns them. You can see the difference most clearly in moments of stress. One family loses a job and quietly cuts back for 6 months. The other loses a job and immediately starts negotiating with creditors, carrying balances from one car to another and pretending everything is fine while panic spreads through the house. The second family may still have the nicer house. They just cannot sleep inside it. That is the part people rarely see. Financial fragility often hides behind polished surfaces. In the 1980s, the millionaire next door was often a small business owner driving an ordinary sedan and living in a modest neighborhood. Today, that same person may still exist, but they are even harder to identify because visible wealth has become so inflated. Someone earning $80,000 can lease the same car, buy the same handbag, and post the same vacation photos as someone worth $8 million. Debt flattened the appearance of wealth, but it did not flatten the consequences. The people who quietly win understand that every visible purchase competes with an invisible asset. That $1,200 monthly car payment is not just a car payment. Left alone and invested consistently, it could quietly grow into more than $200,000 over 10 years. That is the real tension. Every luxury purchase has a shadow price. Every status symbol is competing against future freedom. And most people never see the trade happening until it is too late. This is where the split begins between people who accumulate wealth and people who only perform it. Two neighbors can live on the same street, earn the same salary, even drive similar cars, and still end up in completely different futures. One becomes what researchers used to call a PA, a prodigious accumulator of wealth. The other becomes a UAW, an underaccumulator. Same income, same decade, completely different outcome. The difference is rarely intelligence, it is usually identity. One person sees every raise as a chance to buy a more expensive version of the same life. The other sees every raise as a chance to buy back a little more future time. That sounds small in your 30s. It becomes enormous in your 50s. A household earning $180,000 a year can still be financially trapped if they spend $175,000 of it just to maintain appearances. A teacher earning half as much but living below their means may have more actual flexibility, more savings, less stress, and more room to survive a shock. They earned more money. They just bought less freedom with it. That is the contradiction people do not want to face. Income can create the illusion of safety while quietly increasing dependence. A larger paycheck often comes with a larger mortgage, more subscriptions, pricier habits, private schools, social pressure, and a new circle of people who normalize expensive behavior. At first, it feels like success. Then it starts to feel like maintenance. You can see it in small, humiliating moments. Someone gets invited on a group vacation they cannot really afford, but feels pressured to join. Someone keeps splitting dinner bills with friends who order twice as much. Someone says yes to country club fees, destination weddings, luxury gifts, and private school fundraising because saying no would reveal that their finances are much tighter than they appear. The pressure is not only financial, it becomes emotional. They stop making decisions based on what they value and start making decisions based on what their image requires. A man buys the luxury watch because everyone else at the office has one. A woman upgrades her car because the old one suddenly feels embarrassing in the school pickup line. A family stretches for the bigger house, not because they need the space, but because they cannot bear the idea of looking like they are falling behind. And once that identity forms, it becomes incredibly expensive to maintain. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, easy credit made this even worse. People could finance almost any lifestyle they wanted. The appearance of wealth became available long before the reality of wealth existed. That shift never really ended. It just moved into new forms: buy now, pay later plans, zero-down luxury leases, influencer culture, subscription lifestyles, social media envy. Now people are not only competing with neighbors, they are competing with edited versions of strangers. And edited lives create impossible standards. The people who quietly build wealth understand something uncomfortable. The more desperately you need other people to think you are successful, the easier it becomes to manipulate you. Because once your identity depends on appearing rich, you will overpay for almost everything. There is another cost to visible wealth that almost nobody talks about. It makes you easier to find. The more publicly successful you appear, the more people begin quietly building a story about what you must have. They see the car, the watch, the vacations, the kitchen remodel, the private school photos, the tagged restaurant dinners. They may have no idea what your finances actually look like, but they start making assumptions anyway. And assumptions create targets. Some targets are obvious. Burglars do not usually case neighborhoods by reading tax returns. They look for signs. Luxury vehicles in the driveway. Vacation posts while the house is empty. Expensive packages stacked near the front door. Jewelry visible in family photos. But some targets are more subtle. A cousin suddenly needs a loan. A friend wants help with rent. A business partner assumes you can cover a larger share. An aging parent quietly expects support. A sibling asks you to co-sign. A contractor raises the quote because your house, clothes, and neighborhood suggest you can absorb it. The price changes because they think you can pay it. And often, you do. That is one of the strangest contradictions of visible wealth. The more successful you appear, the more expensive ordinary life becomes. A plumber gives one quote to the retired couple in an old sedan, and another to the homeowner wearing designer shoes. A wedding venue hears the word doctor or lawyer, and suddenly the package changes. A college fundraiser sees the zip code and assumes a bigger donation. The same product, the same service, a different price, not because the wealthy are being punished, because markets are constantly testing what people will tolerate. And people who feel pressured to maintain an image usually tolerate more than they should. There is also a digital version of this now. Social media turned wealth into a trail of breadcrumbs. A family posts beach photos in real time, tags the luxury hotel, shows the airport lounge, films the expensive dinner, uploads the new car, and reveals exactly when nobody is home. Then they wonder how strangers seem to know so much about them. There are people today who can estimate your income, neighborhood, habits, routines, and vulnerabilities just from a few months of public posts. Visible wealth used to attract envy. Now it attracts data collection. And the people most vulnerable are often not the ultra-rich. Truly wealthy families usually hide behind trusts, LLCs, gated communities, lawyers, assistants, and privacy. The most exposed people are often upper-middle-class households trying to look richer than they are. They have enough visible assets to attract attention, but not enough real wealth to absorb the consequences. That is where stealth wealth becomes more than a financial strategy. It becomes a form of personal security, because privacy is not just about hiding money. It is about protecting your ability to say no without guilt, move without scrutiny, and live without becoming a public resource for everyone else's expectations. There is a moment that happens in a lot of adult lives that almost nobody prepares for. You realize that some of the people around you do not want your happiness. They want access. At first it is small. Someone jokes that you should cover the dinner bill because you are doing well. Someone asks if you can help with a down payment, a business idea, a vacation, a legal fee, a school tuition gap. Someone says, you can afford it, with a smile that does not feel like a joke. And if you have spent years building an identity around being successful, generous, or impressive, it becomes very difficult to say no. That is the hidden rule. The more visible your money becomes, the more other people start mentally spending it for you. A man gets promoted and suddenly becomes the automatic choice to pay for family dinners. A woman buys a larger house and relatives begin assuming she has endless capacity to help. A couple upgrades neighborhoods and their social circle shifts with it. The invitations get more expensive. The gifts get larger. The expectations get heavier. Nobody announces this change directly. It just starts happening. And over time, some people begin to feel less like individuals and more like open wallets attached to a personality. That is why stealth wealth often acts like an authenticity filter. When people do not know what you have, they reveal who they are much faster. Friends choose restaurants based on what everyone can afford, not what they assume you can absorb. Romantic relationships develop around personality, habits, values, and compatibility instead of status. Family members learn to solve their own problems instead of quietly assigning them to the most visibly successful person in the room. The relationship becomes more honest because the money becomes less visible. There is relief in that. But there is also discomfort, because sometimes stealth wealth forces you to confront the possibility that certain relationships were built on access, not affection. Some people stay close because they like your lifestyle. Some people become resentful the moment you stop paying, stop upgrading, stop rescuing, stop performing. That can be painful. It can also be clarifying. A woman quietly stops posting luxury vacations online and notices her messages slow down. A man sells the expensive car, moves to a more modest neighborhood, and realizes which friends still call him. A couple decides not to keep up with the social circle around them and suddenly finds themselves excluded from dinners, trips, and parties they never really enjoyed anyway. For a while, it feels like loss. Then it starts to feel like peace. Because the people who remain are usually the ones who cared about the person, not the performance. And that creates something far more valuable than status. It creates relationships that do not collapse the moment the money gets tight. In the end, stealth wealth is not really about looking poor. It is about refusing to become dependent on appearances, because appearances are fragile. They require maintenance. They require approval. They require income to keep flowing, debt to stay available, and other people to keep believing the story. Real wealth is quieter than that. Real wealth is the ability to survive a layoff without panic, to leave a bad job without begging, to absorb a medical bill, help a parent, survive a recession, move cities, take time off, or say no without your entire life collapsing underneath you. That is why the system is so difficult to fix. Entire industries depend on convincing people that success should be visible. Banks profit from financing it. Brands profit from displaying it. Social media profits from amplifying it. Even friends, coworkers, and family members sometimes reward performance more than stability. The pressure never stops, which means the people who adapt are usually the ones who stop playing. They stop treating every raise like permission to spend more. They stop converting private progress into public proof. They stop asking, "How rich do I look?" and start asking, "How long could I last if everything changed?" Because that is the hidden truth beneath all of this. The people who look rich often own the least amount of their own lives. And the people who look ordinary are sometimes one quiet decade away from freedom. A man in an old sweatshirt walking through a grocery store with no luxury watch, no designer labels, and no visible signs of success may have something far more valuable than status. He may have options. He may have time. He may have a life that still belongs to him. Hit subscribe to stop performing and start compounding.